Hi guys, welcome to the video. While we're waiting on the larger deck tech to come from the Night King, I wanted to kind of tide you guys over with something, so I figured it'd be a little bit easier to put out a video with just a few cards, in this case 10, rather than the full deck tech coming with 100 new cards. So for this week we're just going to do a little short video. Today's episode will focus on something that I really enjoy, and I've seen it a few other places around the internet, some other people, some other creative ideas, so I figured I'd give my own shot at it. And so today we're going to be taking a look at 10 what if cards, and the what if cards this week will be what if Overwatch was in Magic the Gathering. Because there are such a large amount of heroes in the game right now, we are only going to be taking a look at the first 10. So basically what I've done is, if this video is successful and you guys want to see more of it, is I will do another 2 of these videos afterwards that will complete the roster of the hero list, and we will have the other cards in those at a later date. So this one will focus on cards that I've just completely created. These are not things that have, I guess, a Vorthos switching in the same way that the Danny cards did, where we were taking an existing card and just applying it to the Song of Ice and Fire universe. This one is just going to be, what do the abilities in the game do, and how can we translate that to work for Magic the Gathering? Now, some of these characters are going to be easier to translate into Magic cards than others. They have a range of abilities, so some will only have 4 abilities, some will have as many as 6 or 7, depending on their passives and other things like that. What we're going to try and do is at least grab 1 or 2 of these abilities and translate them into the cards, but we are also going to try and go for the overall feel. So some of them will have their ultimates incorporated into the card, some will have other abilities. We're really going for the overall feel of the card, and does it feel true to the character. So one other thing that I chose to do when I was designing these cards that some other people I think kind of touched on, but I was noticing a lot of discrepancy with, was the power and toughness of the cards seemed to be kind of what felt right, which I'm not saying is the wrong way to do it, but I wanted to use a little bit more empirical measuring. So basically all of the stats on these cards, unless they're really, really high or really, really low, will be reflective of how the characters scale to each other in game. For example, with the hit points, basically what I did is I took the health pool of all the characters we had, and I said, well, what was the common denominator and how could we easily put this on a scale? So basically for every 1 toughness that a creature has, that will be indicative of 50 hit points in game. For the in-game power of a creature, it took a little bit more math and kind of weird finagling to figure out, but it's based off their primary fire. I'll kind of show you on screen how I figured it out. Some of these characters, like if you think of the tanks in the game, like Winston and Reinhardt, have a very large health pool, so they didn't scale quite 1-to-1, because otherwise we'd be having a 32 health shield in the game for Reinhardt, which I don't think scales well to Magic, because I don't feel like Reinhardt shield could block nearly 3 Eldrazi. In terms of scaling things like the mana cost of the creatures, I basically went about it as to scale it to their abilities. So in terms of the power and the toughness and the potency of their effects, that kind of is what determines a lot of their mana costs. I think that they all seem fairly good. Again, you guys can critique me if you feel unnecessary. I don't know that it's perfect, but I think that it's a good starting place. So the first hero we're going to look at is Tracer. In the video game, Tracer is kind of a damage dealer. She's a very fast-paced character. She has 4 main abilities that we'll be going through. Pulse Pistols is her regular shooting. She has the ability to dash forward in the form of Blink. She can do this 3 times and kind of jump forward around the map. She can also Recall, which will kind of teleport her back and rewind her in a sense. And then her ultimate is Pulse Bomb, which will lob a bomb at an opponent and burst for a little bit of damage. So to represent this best in the game, we are going to start off with her Blink ability being represented with a First Strike and Haste. This kind of gives you a sense of how quick she is, dashing around corners and things like that, catching other people off guard. So I figured the combination of the First Strike being the attacking first and the Haste being able to attack right away was kind of a good compromise for the Blink ability. The next one we're going to have is Recall. Recall, I think there's a few different ways we could do it. I've seen some other people in their own versions of the Magic cards try to do different versions of, tapping effects or negating damage effects for this. Honestly, I think Regenerate just kind of, does a good enough job, and it's simple enough to understand. So our Recall will just be Regenerate for Tracer. And finally, the Pulse Bomb will just be a pay 2 mana, tap, and deal 3 damage, kind of an alternate way of doing a little bit of something to an opponent without necessarily attacking in and tapping. Now, in terms of the color identity choice, I think that Boros was a good place to put her First, because of the First Strike and Haste abilities, and also because in terms of her personality, she's a very noble, courageous person, always in the front lines, so I think this choice worked out well for her. Next, we're going to take a look at Reaper. For his primary ability, Hellfire Shotguns, I thought that Lifelink was kind of the obvious choice here. One of his abilities in-game is to regain a little bit of life when he shoots his targets, so I think that was a nice, easy one-to-one correlation there. For Wraithform and Shadow Step, it was a little bit more difficult to find a one-to-one correlation because there isn't a lot of movement-based effects in Magic in the placement of the cards, so we focused on Death Blossom instead, and for that one, we did the final ability on Reaper's card. However, I did feel like that could just be kind of a constant board wipe, and I kind of wanted to balance it a little bit and make sure that he just wasn't crazy, ridiculously overpowered. So the second ability on Reaper is kind of the offset to that, where I still think it's on theme for him, but it makes the Death Blossom effect not just ridiculous and be able to pull off constantly. For Reaper's color identity, I felt that mono black just kind of was the obvious choice. I don't think there needs to be a lot of explanation in that one. Moving on to our next hero, Reinhardt. This was a little bit more difficult to translate. One of the things we had to do with some of the tanks was actually decrease their toughness to make sure that they were kind of more on scale for the other characters. Technically, Reinhardt should have 10 toughness, but I felt like that was just a little too much, so we scaled it down to 8. And then for his shield effect, which again, if we just use it as the 1600 points that it would have in game, would scale to 32, so we didn't want that really incorporated, so I did it more in the form of his ability with the shield counters. So the first two abilities kind of have a way of protecting other teammates on board and reflect the idea of the shield without having the exact same stat correlation. The charge ability we skipped just because so many of the abilities already, like we'd have a wall of text if we tried to go through all of them, as well as the Fire Strike and the Earth Shatter. So basically we kind of have him more as a protector card, which I think is very on theme for Reinhardt. He does miss out on a few abilities there, but I think in terms of what's represented on board, we did a pretty good job. For Reinhardt's color identity, I think that mono white was a good one. I've seen some other people in their versions of the card do like a white green. I felt for him being basically strictly a protector that mono white still totally fit and didn't overcomplicate his color identity. Moving on, we're going to take a look at Mercy. Now, this one was a little bit tricky to figure out. She's had a few tweaks to her kit over the years, and so representing her in game proved a little bit more difficult than some of the others. Mercy has two main abilities. She can either use her Caduceus Staff to do healing and damage amplification, or to use her blaster just to shoot like all the rest. Now, in addition to that, she also has a gliding ability. Additionally, she's also had several resurrects over the years. Originally, she was able to do a full team resurrect of up to 5 people, which got replaced with the single person resurrection in the form of a non-ultimate ability. Angelic Descent, I think, is just another kind of play off the Guardian Angel glide fly effect, and then her new ultimate, Valkyrie, is kind of just a heightened version of the healing and damage output that she can already do. So how do we represent this in game? Well, flying, I think, for Mercy would be logical, but I think something that would be a little bit more specific in terms of how she flies is she can only fly when there's another creature on board. So that is what the first ability is kind of touching at. Things like if she's flying around with the Divas or the Pharahs or any of the flying characters in Overwatch, that's how she's going to do it. So this is going to count towards our Guardian Angel effect as well as our Angelic Descent effect. Next, we're going to look at her Resurrection, which is her most notorious ability. For this, we are going to base it off the newer version of the effect, so her second ability will just be a pay 3 and tap to return target creature that died this turn to the battlefield. The creature will also come in tapped. This, I think, is really reminiscent of cards like Brought Back, so I felt that it's not too overpowered, it's still within the wheelhouse of what white can do, and yeah, I think that this is kind of a really nice representation of that. We are going to skip abilities like the Valkyrie because that's just kind of a boost, which I think not necessarily what she's known for. I think in recent years it's become more popular, but I think the overall thing that we wanted to make sure we really got in there was the Resurrect. And now the last part of her toolkit that I think we really do need to represent is the healing. So the Caduceus Staff is represented with her final ability, which is the pay 1 white mana and give a creature a boost on your side of the field. I was tinkering with perhaps some kind of preventing damage or other things like that, but I felt that this was probably just the simplest way to do it. In terms of color identity choice, I don't know that Mercy really had another alternative to mono white. I felt that with the returning from the graveyard, coupled with the helping out allies, that this was kind of the one and only place that she would fit. Our next hero has also gone through quite a bit of workarounds similar to Mercy with the ability changes that he's incurred. So we're going to take a look at Torbjorn. The first one we're going to look at is the deploy turret. This is represented with a 1 and blue ability, which will let you create an artifact turret that will do damage in addition to your regular attacking with creatures. This I felt was pretty easy to correlate. In terms of the overload and the forge hammer to, like, you know, repair stuff, that I thought was a little bit too hard and abstract to kind of represent. I was thinking maybe for an overload just do like a +2/+2 or something like that, but with him already having 2 abilities on here, again, I didn't want another wall of text. So the last one we're going to have a look at is the Molten Core. This one we did with his last ability, which is the 2 red, and kind of hits everything until something dies. So again, there's different ways of representing this. This was mine, and I think it kind of works. I also do like it in the color combination that we got with him kind of being an artificer and an inventor. I thought that Izzet was kind of a really fun place to put him. Next, we're going to take a look at Widowmaker, starting off with her Widow's Kiss and her basic ability for using the sniper rifle in a variety of ways. We're going to give her reach just because her ability to shoot, you know, things from a distance totally makes sense. In terms of representing the sniper ability and the ability to headshot and things like that, we kind of have a few abilities here. So the first 2 abilities on Widowmaker are going to be the abilities to give her Death Touch and First Strike, and the second one will allow her to tap and deal 2 damage. If you combo these with a little bit of setup, you can basically, you know, one-hit anything that doesn't have Indestructible or something like that. I've also made this apply to the Planeswalkers as well, so her final ability kind of plays off that. Now, for the grappling hook, that was a little bit more difficult to represent. I kind of feel that reach perhaps covers that. If she's able to get to a, you know, a high vantage point, that kind of can be covered under that. And then for the Infrasight, that's kind of the one that we ended up having to leave off just because I didn't want to overcomplicate the card too much. In terms of her color identity, I think that the blue-black Dimir colors work very well. I think that, you know, especially with the Death Touch and things like that, and Dimir being known for its deceitfulness, that plays in really well to the already existing lore for Widowmaker. So really happy with her here. Moving on to our next hero, Hanzo, we're going to kind of carry forward that sniper ability with the reach, which is another one that I think fits well with him. Now, one of the abilities not listed here on his page is that he can also do a wall climb, so I felt that reach also kind of worked well with that because, again, the high vantage point similar to Widowmaker's grappling hook. For the Sonic Arrow, this one I felt it was a little bit more difficult to represent, so we ended up skipping. And then one of his newer abilities, Storm Arrows, which replaced his existing ability, which I believe was called Scatter Shot or Scatter Arrows, basically lets him do a lot of quick succession fires with his bow. So we did that in the form of his first ability with the paying 2 green for double strike, and then we ended up skipping lunge because, again, being a mobility based effect, kind of hard to represent. And then moving on to his Dragon Strike, we had that represented with the 2 and 2 red ability at the bottom, basically gaining you something like the red elementals we've already seen, something like a Ball Lightning or the 3/1 elementals that come out with Trample and Haste. And I feel like this does a really good job of kind of translating to the game. Not an exact one-to-one, but pretty darn close. In terms of Hanzo's color identity, I felt that the green archer, coupled with the ability to make very like red elemental kind of creatures, basically put him in Gruul. Originally, I had considered putting him in Simic, but that was more kind of for the aesthetic, I think, with him and his brother Genji being kind of very green-blue with the spirit dragons and stuff like that. So I thought that would have a nice aesthetic, but it didn't end up working as well because I don't think that making haste and elemental-like creatures was very blue in nature, so we ended up switching that for red. So on to our next hero, Pharah. Her primary fire is just a rocket launcher, so there's nothing we really need to consider too much in there. For her jump jet ability, we are simply going to represent that with flying. For concussive blast, we are going to represent this with a 2 and a blue, tap a creature and remove it from combat, kind of similar to how it would knock a character back and remove them from combat in the actual game. Her next ability, Barrage, I think kind of works well as a mini board wipe. So we have 2 white, tap, and it will deal 4 damage to all other creatures. In terms of her color identity, I thought that with all the Azorius flyers already in existence, this one kind of was a nice fit. The blue tap effect I thought was on theme, and as much as we might see some of these damage dealing effects in something like red, I do feel that because it kind of acts like a mini board wipe, this is still pretty on theme for white, so easy peasy for Pharah. Moving on to hero number 9, Winston, we're going to start off with his Tesla cannon ability. This was one of those ones that I felt scaled kind of oddly to the game because it's more of an area of effect rather than a single target kind of damage. So it is kind of low, however I feel that with his other abilities that we'll go through, it will kind of be compensated in that way. So let's move on to his first ability. Jump Pack is going to allow him to defend some other people on board, so that's kind of what we have with the first ability. Basically, he gets to block an additional creature each turn. I had originally had a more complicated version of this where if another creature was blocking or being blocked, you could swap it out with Winston. However, the ability became very text-laden and very specific, so I didn't want to make any kind of weird rules call there and make some kind of really broken card and or just something that was really difficult to understand. So then the next ability we have is kind of building into this rage idea. Originally I had a separate counter system that wouldn't be just +1/+1s, but because I put him in Simic colors, which I felt worked with his identity, like if you're thinking of a lot of scientists, you're going to see things in blue, and if you're seeing a lot of ape warriors, well, that fits in green. So the +1/+1 in Simic colors I thought was a very nice fit for him, and basically how it's going to work is that as he gets these +1/+1 counters put on him, you can remove them and trigger his primal rage ability. We ended up skipping the barrier protection again because we're trying to avoid walls of text, but overall I think, yeah, this is a pretty good representation of him, and actually just like a really good Simic card in general. Like if this was an actual card, I would be more than happy to play this. Hopefully the mana cost is balanced with that, so that's my only quarrel. And now on to our final hero for the day, Zenyatta. This one I kind of knew right where I wanted to go with him from the get-go. With Orb of Harmony and Orb of Discord, I felt like he could play into kind of a Gisela Blade of Gold Knight space, where his Orb of Harmony and Orb of Discord would cause the corresponding effects. With the already existing text here, I felt that as much as Transcendence might have had a cool effect, like, you know, gaining Indestructible for all creatures till end of turn, I just didn't want to, again, overcomplicate the card. So we did the Harmony and Discord, and I felt like this is pretty on theme for Zenyatta. Like, this is going to be what he's doing most of the time. He's not necessarily going to be using his ultimate on every turn. In terms of color identity for Zenyatta, I kind of felt that with the balance of light and dark, that Orzhov was the perfect place to put him. Not the normal kind of aristocrat stuff you might normally see, but nonetheless still a good fit. So there you go, guys. That's going to wrap up the first 10 characters and going to wrap up today's video as well. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you would like to see more content like this in the future, and make sure to stay tuned next week when I'm hoping to get out the full Night King deck tech previously mentioned on our last video. That's all for today, and remember to have a good one.